Hi, welcome to One Eye on the Page. This is Scott. We're doing 5-Year Battle, Stephen King, 1999 to 2003. And before I get into that, I want to apologize that I had Hearts in Atlantis listed in the last video. I have tried to edit that as much as possible to get out of here, but it was published in 1999, so it should actually be part of this collection. So I'm going to include it in this collection and remove it from that one. And you're going to have to move wash. So we're going to go ahead and start with Hearts in Atlantis, published in 1999. It's about Vietnam. Generally, it's centered around Vietnam. It's 5 stories. One of them, the longer novella, Low Men in Yellow Coats, plus Hearts in Atlantis, Blind Willie, Why We're in Vietnam, and Heavily Knights of Shade Are Falling. Low Men in Yellow Coats is an excellent novella. It doesn't quite stand up to the same level as the different season novellas with The Library Policeman or even The Mist, but it introduces us to Ted Brodigan, who will appear later in other works. It's a fairly nice friendship story, somewhat of a science fiction story. Then we go to Hearts in Atlantis, which is about playing hearts. Not overall, but that's generally where it's at. It's a good story in itself. I don't really know how it holds up through the rest of this. And also, throughout these stories, characters will appear that had been in previous stories. So, like, the main character in Hearts in Atlantis dated a girl who was in Low Men in Yellow Coats, and she will appear in later stories also. Blind Willie, I don't know, it's mainly about PTSD, I would guess. I just don't particularly care for it. Why We're in Vietnam generally doesn't stand out to me that much. Heavily Shades of Night Are Falling is a beautiful final story, well written, but overall, as far as the collection goes, this will probably be lower than most collections for me. But Low Men in Yellow Coats is definitely a fantastic read that you should read if you haven't already done so. I'm going to put this here, so I hope you don't, yeah, okay. That is currently the first book and the last book right now. The next book we have, because it was published, is Storm of the Century, which is the screenplay for the miniseries that King wrote. A winter storm in a Maine town. A dark stranger comes to town and wants something from the townsfolk. Honestly, as far as King's miniseries that he has written, this one stands up there a bit. But because it is a screenplay, it's not going to have the same impact as a book, as a novel, or a short story collection is. I don't know if it's going to be the bottom of the list for this, but it is going to be, at least for right now. I'm just going to sit there, huh, Wash? The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. Honestly, this is more a novella than a novel, but I mean, probably about the same length as Carrie. So this is going to be one of those books that I will probably like better than most people. I was a baseball fan at the time, although I don't think you need to be a baseball fan to like this book. I just thought it was a well-written story. It's about a girl who gets lost in the woods, and she tries to make her way back to civilization, and in doing so, talks to a image of the baseball player Tom Gordon. in her head, basically. There are, I mentioned in the last video that I didn't think like King needed to add elements to Gerald's Game or Rose Matter. And this is another woman or girl in jeopardy kind of story. But I think that those added elements actually contribute to the story. And also, unlike those stories, the elements are like, oh, well, this could be what she's seeing in her head. So I love this. It's a quick read. Read it if you love or you don't love baseball. I believe it's being made into a movie. If it's not, it should be. Just a good story. Covers to an extent children who are children of divorce. So I'm actually going to rank this above Hearts in Atlantis. I said before in the last video that Stephen King had an accident in 1999. He was hit by a van. This is the first novel that he published after that. It's awesome that he was able to publish a novel after that because he was hit hard and he was in the hospital for a while, developed an infection, had a addiction to his medicine, and he wrote this mainly in on pen, the Dreamcatcher. That being said, it's not a great novel. It's just not a great novel. It's another alien novel. Aliens are part of this, and Stephen King doesn't necessarily do great with aliens, as I believe we saw in the Tommyknockers. It's one of the books that I've discovered is better upon reread than when I first read it, but I still don't think that it's particularly good, but I'm glad he was able to write it. And so I'm going to rank this below Hearts in Atlantis. Before he was in the accident, King started writing, and he finished it after the accident. It's a nonfiction book that is about writing itself, and it gives a lot of useful advice to writers, but it's also somewhat of a memoir about his growing up, his addiction, even the accident. And it's just an excellent book all around. Pick this up if you want to know about writers. Pick this up if you want to know about writing, if you want to know about addiction. It's just a great, great book. I don't know if this is going to be number one, but it's going to be number one right now. I also have, and most people probably won't have this, Secret Windows, which is a collection of nonfiction from King. It's a collection like stuff that he wrote when he was a kid for his brother's newspaper, stuff that was published in the Writer's Market, Forward to Night Shift, stuff about banned books. It's just an overall collection of nonfiction. The real problem that it has is that it was published in the same year as On Writing, which, there's not a lot of unity to this. Like I said, it's just a collection of nonfiction, which you should read, but it doesn't stand up as well as, On Writing or other of his nonfiction. So if it doesn't have an overriding theme, it's hard for me to rate it very high. If you're a Stephen King fan, you should read this, but I'm going to rank this below Dreamcatcher. From a Buick 8. This one's difficult. It's another one that's written after his accident, and it's a book that doesn't really have a resolution. I mean, I've talked before about how people have said King doesn't know how to do writings, although I don't agree with that. but he does have bad endings. And then he does have books that don't really have endings, which this is one of them. And the Colorado Kid is another, which will be coming up. So if you're looking for a resolution, this book is not for you. It's a good book. It's another one of those ones like I talked before. Like if I was doing a tier list, this would probably be, in the middle. It'd be like a C, maybe a high D. None of the characters really stand out particularly well, although it does have the brotherhood of police officers in the small town and what holds them together. If you're looking for an ending, this just isn't it. Dreamcatcher has an ending, as much as I may not like it, and this one doesn't, but I still think that I'm going to have to rank this one above Dreamcatcher. All right, and then we have the sequel to the Talisman, Black House, by Stephen King and Peter Straub. Unfortunately, since Mr. Straub has passed away, it does not look like we will get a third book in the series. This one's a difficult book because I talked before about the Talisman that some people didn't like it as much as I did, but a lot of people were angry at this book as a sequel to the Talisman because for the most part, this is all in our world. And it's also somewhat of a serial killer novel, a hunt for a serial killer. Jack Sawyer, the little boy from the Talisman, is now a man and a detective. And some of the stuff that he did for the Talisman didn't necessarily turn out that well. Some of the characters from the Talisman, I'll let you know after. Rational Richard doesn't show up in this novel really, except for like I believe he has a phone call, and I'm upset about Richard's changes, although I guess they make sense. Um, Speedy Parker uh, does show up in here, and there are memorable characters in here, and there's like a super liter- literate and intelligent biker gang that seems ridiculous, but I still love it. I really like this book, but if you go into this book expecting the Talisman 2, you are not going to get it, and that may be a disappointment to you. And some of the writing choices may be a disappointment to you, like just the way it opens up the book. And if you have issues with author intrusion, that may be a problem for you. It wasn't a problem for me. I really like this book. Once I got past it not being the Talisman 2, and little bummed that Richard didn't show up in a way that I wanted to show up, and obviously bummed that Wolf didn't show up, but that makes sense. I'm going to put this below on writing. We have another short story collection, Everything's Eventual. There's only 14 short stories in here, but the book is over 450 pages long. So, King has gotten elephantitis of the story going on here. Autopsy Room number 4. Autopsy Room 4 is hilarious. The Man in the Black Suit won an O. Henry Award. Not my favorite King story, but it's a good story. The Little Sisters of Eulalia is a Dark Tower story. LT's Theory of Pets is hilarious and heartbreaking. Lunch at the Gotham Cafe is just absurd. 1408 you may have seen as a John Cusack movie. It's a very good short story. There are a couple standout here. I think over time the quality of Stephen King short story collections have gone down. Now I do believe that the next short story collection will go back up in quality, but I think this kind of follow suit, from Night Shift and Skeleton Crew being pretty high-end short story collections, and the ones following kind of being hit or miss. But I am going to put this. Let's get it. I'm going to put it below Hearts of Atlantis. You're just not going to move, are you, Wash? All right. This one I question whether or not to include it, but I've included the Stand complete and uncut edition. So I guess don't you knock those over, dude. I guess I need to include the revised edition of the Gunslinger. A lot of it was just written to get it more in line with some of the stuff that's going to appear in the last 3 Dark Tower novels. But I think overall, this is better than the 1982 version. It's more cohesive, and it's, like I said, it just ties things in together. It's almost unfair because, it's not like the Stand where he's just redoing the one book. He's redoing the book, but he's also including stuff from the other Dark Tower books, so he's able to patch it all together the way he wants it. But I do think if I read The Gunslinger, which The Gunslinger's, no, it's probably not my least read book, but it's my least read of the first 4 books. If I were to read it again, I'd probably read this version. And I'm going to. This one's difficult. I'm going to put it below The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. I think if it had been the only version of The Gunslinger, I'd put it above The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. But because it's a revised edition, I think that's why I put it under. I have one more book to look at and to give me a decision, give me the opportunity to change my mind on that, but we'll see. The Dark Tower 5, Wolves of the Kala. I like Dark Tower 1. I love Dark Tower 2 through 4. I love Dark Tower 7. 5 and 6. I don't know. This introduces us or reintroduces us to Father Callahan, who we saw in Salem's Lot. He appears in this novel. Susanna is pregnant. I believe, I can't remember what he compared to, but King compared this to a Western movie. And that there is like a huge final battle scene in here. As a standalone novel, it's pretty good. And I understand King's wanting to finish up the Dark Tower series, particularly after his accident. But as part of the Dark Tower series, I think this is probably better than the Song of Susanna. Those two may be the worst of the series. However, I still think I'm going to rank it above Hearts in Atlantis because I love me some Dark Tower. And I get to spend time with Eddie and Jake and Susanna and Oi and Roland, that guy. To me, it's still good. Number 11, Storm of the Century. Number 10, Secret Windows. Number 9, Dreamcatcher. Number 8, from a Buick 8. I don't arrange them like that on purpose. Number 7, Everything's Eventual. Number 6, Hearts in Atlantis. Number 5, I really don't arrange these in this way on purpose. The Dark Tower 5, Wolves of Kala. See? Number 4, The Dark Tower 1, The Gunslinger Revised Edition. Number 3, and probably my big surprise is that it's this high up, is The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. I doubt that that's anyone's number 3, even for that 5-year period. Number 2, Black House. Number 1, King's best nonfiction book on writing. That is 1999 through 2003. We will see you next time where we're doing 2004 through 2008.